Hi everybody, my name's Hannah and I'm super excited to be here today doing my very first episode of Shell and Tell. This video is brought to you in partnership with the School of Technology and Environment at the Nova Scotia Community College. And the reason I'm so excited to be doing this video is that I get to tell you all about one of my favorite animals. Can you guess what it is? Do you see any clues maybe? Right, it's lobsters. Here in Nova Scotia, lobsters are a big part of our cultural identity, which is awesome because they're super cool animals. There are a whole bunch of different kinds of lobsters all around the world. Scientists give them different names in Latin to be able to tell them apart. The ones we have here are called Homarus americanus. That just means North American lobster. Pretty easy, right? I've been told that the genus name, Homarus, is similar to the French word for lobster, but I don't speak French. Maybe if you do, you can tell me if that's true. The Homarus americanus, the North American lobster, is the biggest kind of lobster in the world. The biggest one ever was actually caught near Halifax, and it was almost 45 pounds. That's almost as big as a 4-year-old human. Can you even imagine a lobster that big? I'd love to see that. Usually, if you see a picture of a lobster or a stuffed animal lobster, like this one, they're red. But that red color actually only happens when the lobster is cooked. In the wild, lobsters can be a whole bunch of different colors, but they're usually brown. That brown color comes from a whole bunch of different pigments, or color molecules, all mixed together. It's sort of like how if you have paint and you mix all of your paint colors together, it looks brown. Kind of a similar concept. If you look close at a lobster, you can sometimes see little bits of those pigments in the shell, so you might see little speckles of blue or orange. Sometimes you can get really rare lobsters that don't have the correct number of pigments, so they might have way too many orange pigments and not enough blue pigments, and they'll look orange. Or you might have the opposite, where the lobster has only blue pigments, so they look blue. Now, I don't have a real blue lobster to share with you today, but I do have this stuffed friend here. Now, this lobster is a stuffed animal, so it's soft and squishy and good for snuggling. But in the wild, lobsters are usually pretty hard. That's because they have what's called an exoskeleton, or a shell. Exoskeleton just means that the skeleton, or the hard parts of the lobster, are on the outside. People have endoskeletons, so our skeleton is on the inside. Now, you might wonder, hold on, how can a lobster ever get bigger if it has a shell? You'd think that if you tried to grow when you have a shell, you'd just end up all squished up on the inside of the shell. And that's more or less right. Lobsters and other animals with exoskeletons have to molt in order to be able to grow. So molting is when they shed that old shell, sort of like how a snake sheds its old skin. With lobsters, when the lobster is getting ready to molt, the shell will actually split open across the back here, where the tail joins the rest of the body, and all the way up the back towards the eyes. Then the shell will peel open and the lobster will wiggle out of the old shell, and then it looks like you have two lobsters. But one of them is the lobster, and one of them is the old empty shell. The empty shells look so much like lobsters because there's a little bit of shell covering the whole lobster, even the eyes and the mouth. So when it sheds that old shell, the molt still looks like it has eyes. It's kind of cool. Now, remember how I said that lobsters are usually hard? That's because right after a lobster has molted or shed its shell, it's really, really soft and squishy while it waits for the new shell to harden. And that can be really dangerous for a lobster, because when it's soft and squishy like that, it can't defend itself from predators. So a lobster that's just molted will go and hide in a cave or something and wait until it's safe to go outside again. If you think about it, it's sort of like social distancing. Now let's look closer at our squishy friend here. Lobsters are part of a group of animals called decapods. Remember how I was talking about Latin earlier? In Latin, deca means 10, and pod means foot. So do you think lobsters have 10 feet? Why don't we count them? All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, looks like 10 to me. Now, okay, I'm sure someone is saying, but Hannah, 2 of those are claws, not feet. And you're right, but to a lobster, they're the same thing. We just won't tell them. The big claws on a lobster are its most distinctive feature. And these claws are used for a lot of things, like hunting for food, protecting themselves from predators, and fighting with other lobsters. These claws are really strong. I once got pinched by a lobster, right here, and she held on so tight I couldn't get her off for almost 20 minutes. Now the 2 claws are actually different from each other. One is called a crusher claw, and one is called a pincher claw. It's hard to tell on our squishy friend here, because this is just a stuffed animal, but the crusher claw is usually bigger, rounder, and moves slower than the other claw. It's really good for crushing things. So a lobster might use the crusher claw when it wants to eat something like a clam that doesn't move very fast and has a hard shell. The other claw is the pincher claw. The pincher claw is smaller, sharper, and moves a lot faster, so it can catch something really fast, like a fish, maybe. But it can't hold on for as long as the crusher claw before it gets tired. So because their 2 claws are different, like people, lobsters can be right or left-handed. Most lobsters are left-handed, which means that the crusher claw is the one on the left. So if you're left-handed too, that makes you kind of like a lobster. That's pretty cool. On a boy lobster, the claws are usually a little bit bigger, and on a girl lobster, the tail is usually a little bit bigger. So if you know what you're looking for, you can usually tell if a lobster is a boy or a girl. I think our squishy friend here is a girl, because the tail is almost as wide as the rest of the body, and the claws aren't necessarily the biggest. I'm going to call her Barbara. Now we've talked about a lot today, and I hope you learned something about lobsters that you didn't know before. Next time you see one, take a closer look and see if you can spot some of the things that we talked about. See if you can look at the color of the shell and find those different speckles of blue and orange in the brown part. Or see if you can find the line that goes up the back, where the lobster will split open when it molts. Maybe try counting the number of legs and seeing if the lobster actually has all 10 of them. Or look at the claws and see if you can tell which one is the crusher and which one is the pincher. As for me and Barbara, I think we're going to go have some lunch. In the wild, lobsters will eat almost anything that they can get their claws into, like shellfish, regular fish, or even worms. Scientists call that being opportunistic. I call it being hungry. Me and Barbara are going to go be opportunistic in my kitchen. See you next time!